What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode number 2 here on the Dry Brook Esopus Valley. Today we're going to be doing a little bit of work around the interchange area here. We're going to be doing a lot of experimentation with some assets today, as you'll see in just a moment. Actually, right away here, the first thing you're going to see is a little bit experimentation with this new road system that I'm going for. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that first. Hopefully I get this right this time. This is like the 5th time I'm recording this. Lots of technical issues this episode. Anyway, so the first thing that we're doing here is working on this underpass. And what I wanted to do with this whole route is kind of have a different approach to laying out roads. And I wanted to sort of stray away a bit from doing roads the traditional style using splines. And the reason for that is that splines are a little bit rigid, I guess, in their use, right? Because you have a spline that's got 2 lanes and it's got a double yellow line, or maybe it's got a yellow line, a solid yellow line, and a dashed line, and the 2 white lines on the shoulders and a short shoulder, and then it's like, going into the terrain. You can bend those and shape them the way that you want, and they work really well for roads that are just going to continue. But what I want in this map is to have a little bit more of a dynamic style with the roads. I want to be able to blend roads into parking lots and blend roads into other roads a little bit more seamlessly. I want to add extra lanes here and there, make lanes disappear. I want to do a lot of different stuff like that. So in order to do that, I can't use the regular spline roads. So I'm using the spline road markings from Felix at Jointed Rail, which I always am talking about, and I just think that they're the greatest thing since that has come to this game in recent times. I think that they're excellent assets, and they're really going to play a big role here on this route, just laying out different roads. And there's some pros and cons to this method, which I'll get into as we go along. I guess the number 1 con is that it's very time-consuming. It can be very time-consuming to lay out all these roads, lay out the markings, because you have to lay out the double line or whatever your middle marking is going to be, and then you got to lay out your shoulder markings, and if you have multiple lanes, then you have to lay those out as well. But I think the flexibility and that you get from doing this method is sort of outweighs the amount of time that it takes to do, and it really doesn't take that much more time. I want to point out right now, right here, what I'm working on with this retaining wall situation here. I'm looking for a way to fill in this gap on the side of the retaining wall, and I found this really great asset right here. The KUID number is in the bottom right corner. You guys should get that asset for filling in these kind of gaps. It's a nice tall cement wall, like a retaining wall sort of situation, and it does the job perfectly for this type of situation when you have a retaining wall and you need to split it, so to speak. And that sort of filled up the area really nicely. So I guess while we're talking about the retaining wall and talking about different styles for laying roads, we're going to talk about some different styles for parking lots as well. And this is something else that I'm going to be experimenting around a lot with in this map. So with this situation that we have here, we've got the retaining wall, and on the back side of the retaining wall is sort of a terrain filler sort of thing, since you can't have any vertical terrain, very good vertical terrain at least, in Trainz. So you get this sort of filler spline sort of situation behind it, but it doesn't always merge up perfectly with whatever terrain is behind it, right? And if you're trying to do a parking lot like what we're doing here, it doesn't necessarily blend. So this first bit, what I tried to do was bring in another spline, another asphalt spline, and sort of bring it up to the ground level where the asphalt actually is, and then bring it to the edge of the back side of the retaining wall. And that sort of works, but as you can see, not necessarily in this spot here, but when the camera pans back around to it, it's not even, it's not square, it doesn't blend in perfectly, it's not the same color asphalt, it doesn't feel like it's a freshly paved area. Something about it just doesn't seem right. So what I end up doing actually is covering up that area a little tiny bit with some junk and some trucks, which works temporarily. But we're gonna revisit that in a bit towards the end. I'm actually getting way ahead of myself right now. So let me get back in gear here. So what we're doing at this point is I'm trying to fill in this kind of awkward spot here. I wanted to put a building in the spot where where I'm putting these trees and all this vegetation. But I couldn't find any buildings that looked right. I thought maybe a deli would look good there or something like that, but I couldn't find any good assets. So I figured going with the whole theme of this sort of industrial or former industrial area, former really busy, heavy industrial type area, and downtown sort of deserted scene sort of feel. I'm saying sort of a lot. I gotta stop that. I kind of wanted to have the feeling that maybe there was a building there was a structure there. It burned down. It's gone now. It's just an empty lot. The property hasn't sold, so it's not really being used for anything. So that's the idea with that, and I think it kind of works there. And I did a little detailing in between in between shooting some of these scenes and stuff like that, so there might be some detailed jumps. But anyway, so now we're back to the parking lot here, and I'm just adding some details, adding some bollards. I don't know how you pronounce them properly, but the things that help prevent trucks from backing into buildings and demolishing them. So I'm adding some of those all over the place. We're going to be using a lot of those throughout this series. So now we're going to direct our focus to the other side of the mainline tracks here, and we're going to encounter the same sort of situation with the parking lot that I'm going to put here. And again, I'm trying this thing with this asphalt spline, which it could work if the terrain was perfectly flat, I guess. If everything was even, it wouldn't be a big deal. And if I could also find maybe a texture to match it, it would probably look a lot better. So that is what I'm trying to do there. We're gonna come back, I think. At some point, we're gonna come back to that in this episode, and you'll see some other techniques that I use to try to fill in the area, which I'm pretty happy about. But right here, I'm trying to draw my attention to the rest of the abandoned track. And so I drew out where the main line used to be. This is all completely abandoned track. It's not used. And I'm gonna really scenic it like crazy, and it's gonna be really grown in. You'll see. It's gonna be great. I love it. I love the feel of it because it's totally broken off from the main line. There's nothing connecting it, and you can just tell that it's been a really long time since any freight traffic has been on these rails, and I just think that is just the coolest feeling in the world, and it really reminds me of the real deal. But here we are trying to do the same thing with the roads. Now, here is where things get a little bit interesting between using spline roads and doing roads manually. And the thing is with doing it in this technique is that it works okay in straight lines if you're going north-south or east-to-west. You cannot do it on angles because of the way that the textures kind of like splat out when you're laying textures down in this game. Because the road kind of needs, it doesn't need like a direct or a very perfect edge, but it needs some kind of an edge, right? The roads aren't just gravel. I mean, some roads are, but they don't just spill out into the earth and that sort of thing. They do have a little bit of a defined edge. So that's really difficult to do, as you can see by the textures right here. So like I said, experimenting with things, I don't know what situations this technique is going to work better than in other situations. So right now I'm trying to do all manual roads because I think that's great. And you'll see as this build progresses, the way that the road kind of blends in with parking lots and using some of these road markings and stuff like that to direct traffic around it feels much, much more realistic than using road splines. So I like the look of it. I think it's just going to be a matter of figuring out where it works best and where spline roads work best, because I think that there's going to be a fine line between the two. And I'm not quite sure where to draw that line just yet, but I think you guys will probably have some feedback for me. So let me know down in the comments what you think about that and where maybe some of the best cases or worst cases might be for that. So now coming back into this parking lot area here, trying to fill in this gap. I'm trying to do something a little bit different. And if you look at a lot of parking lots in the United States, they're not always just perfect asphalt, like, you know, laid out, even whatever. You know, some of them have different types of asphalt, or they'll have poured concrete. It depends on the usage of the parking lot, I guess. So if you have heavier usage, usually you want cement, because cement is very durable, or concrete. It's way more durable than asphalt. So if you have really heavy trucks that are going to be sitting in a parking lot for a long time, if it's sitting on asphalt, you can get like divots and it'll warp the asphalt, right? So in some places, and this can also be if there's like oil spills and stuff like that, places where things might spill down, cement might be a better choice than asphalt. So I'm trying to experiment with that, and I'm actually considering maybe making a few of these assets myself that are just big slabs, I guess, that have different asphalt textures that maybe they can blend in a little bit better with some of the textures around them, but add enough geometry to the ground to feel like a separate thing, that it was maybe intentionally put there and intentionally divide that area out. Now, right now, I want to give a big shout out to LTG over at the back shops for these assets here. If you guys don't know the back shops, go check them out. They've got some really great assets over there, abandoned assets, buildings. They're working on some routes. They got a whole bunch of stuff lined up. But those crossing gates, those abandoned crossing gates, are just superb for this route. So I just wanted to give them a little bit of a shout out there, because I'm going to be using some of their stuff in this route, and it's just very, very well done. I can't say enough good things about their assets, specifically these crossing gates. And they added such a nice flavor to this sort of abandoned industry area and abandoned crossing area, where I think I got some close-ups for the cinematics, so you'll see that the gate was removed and some of the signposts and stuff like that were removed, and it's all weathered and beat up, and it's perfect. It's just great for a scene that looks like it hasn't had any freight traffic on it in like the last 20 or 30 years, whatever it might have been. So continuing on, we're working on the old right-of-way here. Again, like I said, I'm trying to scenic it in as much as possible, but I don't want to overdo it. I kind of want to make it feel like it's been sort of a recent abandonment, but not so long ago that there's going to be trees, full-blown trees growing up out of the rails. Like, maybe these tracks are still here because somebody's hanging on to hope that maybe they'll be reactivated at some point, even though they're completely cut off from the main line and the crossing is gone and that sort of thing. But maybe they're still just, quote unquote, out of service instead of abandoned. Who knows? I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. I haven't thought too much about that. But right now, I like the idea of them just being completely out of service, permanently out of service, really, and never to see freight traffic ever again. So now at this point, I wanted to do a little bit more detailing around this parking lot and give it a little bit more purpose, right? And also sort of like cluster up this area. So I found this pipe bridge, which looks really great, some of these tanks. And that just adds like a little bit more to the story, that those rails have been there long enough that whenever those tanks went in and those pipes went in, they had to go up and over the tracks, right? Because there was still freight traffic when they put them in. So I think that adds a little like detail to the history of the line, and I just like stuff like that. So I'm hoping to do more of that sort of thing going forward. And sometimes these ideas come to me while I'm building. I try to go into each build with like a preconceived idea of what I'm going to do and what I hope to accomplish. But sometimes, like, once I just get going and the episode is going and I'm recording, like, things come to mind, and this was one of those things where I was just like, oh, this would actually look really cool here. Let me add some pipes and some tanks and stuff like that. Like, I don't know what purpose it would serve. It doesn't matter to me. I don't know what it's doing there or why it's sending, whatever fluids from one building to the other. I have no idea, but it does bring some background and some story to the scene, and I think that's what's important. Plus, it fills up some space, and that's also not such a bad thing. I'm also going to be doing a lot more with lighting in this route as well. You'll see me putting down a lot of these Laurel Line, I think they're called Laurel Line light posts, street lights and stuff like that. I know that there's no point lighting in Trainz yet, not in Trainz 2019 or anything like that, which is a real bummer. But I'm still going to add the light posts because during the daytime they still add to that visual noise. So now at this part of the build, this is where I was talking about where you'll really see what I mean by merging these roads with parking lots and sort of like blurring the lines between where a road ends and a parking lot begins, or there's a dead end or something like that. So what I had before, I don't know if it made it into the video or not, but there was a road spline that came down into a dead end, and then there was a road going in the other direction. And they did have traffic on them, and it was kind of annoying to see the traffic like spawn and then despawn and then spawn and despawn as it like hit the dead end, and it just looked so unrealistic to me. And I didn't also like the way that the edge of the road spline kind of felt like an edge of a road spline, going into a parking lot. And I couldn't find like a good way to blend the two together. And I think that this is going to be an excellent solution doing this sort of thing. Now, I'd like to mention I'm using a wall asset here for a wall spline for curbs. Again, the KUID is in the bottom right-hand corner. You can look it up. But it is actually just a wall, like a cement wall asset, which looks really, really good, actually, by the way. I think it's like a 4 or 5 foot high cement wall. But what I've been doing is just like moving it and squishing it into the ground, and so there's only a little tiny bit sticking out of the top. And then kind of using that to mimic like a curb or around a sidewalk or something like that. And I think the effect is pretty good, and it also works really nicely if your terrain height changes because it is a wall. It's not like a little skinny, curb asset. So the wall will still conform with the terrain, and it seems to work pretty nicely. The other thing about doing these roads this way is that you can mix up the textures, right? So you can find different 2ME assets that you like, the ones that I use. So some of them have a lot of cracks and potholes and stuff like that. You can use those if you want a really beat up road. Or if you want a nice new road, you can use a different asphalt texture, and you'll get different effects for it. And you could blend them, so maybe half the road looks like it's brand new and the other half is all cracked and beat up. So you could do different things like that, and I think that's what I really like about the flexibility with this. And the other thing that I noticed with these spline roads before I started recording this episode is that the road is so narrow. Like I ran all these spline roads through this downtown area, and I started looking at it. I'm like, there's no street parking. There is absolutely no place for cars to park on the street. And I was like, I wanted to put cars on the street. So I figured, hey, why not? Let's try this. I guess I experimented a little bit with this in the Dayton and Troy, although I didn't really use road markings that I can remember too much of. But I did do the non-road splines for the most part. But the flexibility is great. You can really outline areas and highlight areas that you want to show off and pretend that you're directing traffic. Get this nice curved white shoulder marking, or I don't know what the term is for the white line. It's just a white line. And then use these yellow ones to denote where trucks can park and where they can't park. And I think that's really cool. It adds like a whole new level of design, I guess, to the worlds. And then what I'll do later on, there's no traffic on here right now, but what I could do later on is come through with some traffic spline, whatever it is, invisible traffic road assets. And I can lay those down in the areas that I want to have traffic actually driving around. And then I don't have to worry about connecting like this road and then that road, and it works out a little bit more nicely, I think. But again, like I said, it's not gonna work perfectly in every situation because there's some points sometimes where you're gonna need the edge of the road. You need, the whole edge of the spline point of the road. But I guess that's it. This is the end of the episode. These are the cinematics. So we're going to take a look at some stuff here. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I hope you're enjoying the series so far. I know this is only episode 2, but I'm super pumped to get into this, and I'm going to be hopefully getting back into releasing episodes every week as best as I can for a little while. If you guys enjoyed the video, please leave me a like, and if you'd like to yell something at me, leave it down in the comments section. I love reading your comments. So thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.